from chapter 68, you write, when one is initiated into the sacred work, path, and process of purification in the spirit of enlightenment, and does not do all that is possible to attain liberation from all sorrow, but instead remains hoping or intending to do so after one's presumed karmic obligations are fulfilled, one risks opening to the karmas of stagnation, confusion, and regression, even while progressing in certain ways. My question is, how might one progress in certain ways while being open to confusion and stagnation? Can you give an example?
Well, firstly, certain obligations that we have, that we hold to be sacred, disappear in the light of spirit. And we have to be ready to confront that. The light of spirit is not necessarily that which supports all of your karmic machinations and your business deals and your marriage deals and your family deals. See? When the spirit, the infusion of spirit comes in, when the light descends upon you, so or bursts forth from your, arises from your heart, all bets are off, for the most part. See? And as we have seen in history, what happens when these individuals are touched by the fire of spirit, they leave everything. Hook, line, and sinker. They leave everything and move on. They go on to somewhere else. See? They often become monks because what was theirs is taken away from them by the burn of spirit. They can't do anything about it. It's done. It's over. They die and are reborn in a split second. And they're not reborn into religion. See? We're not talking about that kind of rebirth where you didn't know your religion, 5 minutes ago, and then all of a sudden you know your religion, and then you're supposedly transformed. You're not transformed. You are maybe slightly awakened to another dynamic of your own being, or born again, metaphorically speaking, but not actually. See? Because you're still the same person, you're still doing the same things, you're still being the same self. You're still suffering the same karma, except now you have the deity to put it on now. And it's all about the deity, it's not about you. So you might be neglecting your responsibilities and obligations at that point in the manner of speaking. See, when the spirit comes in, everything is made anew. And that's a paradox and a frightening proposition, but it could be that way, and it has been that way. That means then you have the imposition or the intervention of another dimension coming into your world. You become kind of like an alien to this world, in a matter of speaking, maybe in a small way. But you're no longer part of this world. You're no longer part of the belief system of this world. You're no longer part of the convictions and the mores and norms of this world. You become born again in spirit. You're no longer the same being. You don't know what you used to know in the same way. You don't have the same relations anymore. That's radical. But it could be that way, as it has been for many who have walked the spirit path. See? And so when we're talking about confusion and stagnation, you are progressing when you recognize them for what they are. And you're not ignoring them or denying what they are. When you're out of denial, then you can recognize your negative states properly. Then you are making progress. And when you see that you are not those negative states, and that they're borrowed through the blood, or taken on, inherited, and so on, then you're really making progress, because you know they can be burnt, and they need to be burnt. And you hope and you pray, and you open the spirit to say, yes, take all of this away. Give me the spiritual life. Take away this life of darkness, see? And fake obligations, fake duties, fake, let's say, relations, see, karmic relations. You want to be restored to your relationship to the divine, not just to peeps. See? You want to have your level of communion expanded into the heart of the universe. See? You want to know God. You don't want to know about God. You want to know Godness. See? Not just a little bit of information about where it might live in some other galaxy, in some other heaven way out there. You got to put up your biggest telescope, right, or your most super microscope to try to find that which is infinite. You can't find it out there. See? It's not out there. It is you. It's present. You have to realize the presence of what the God is, or the presence of spirit now, and it's radical. See? It doesn't mean disaster. It means awakening. And at the same time, there's more of the paradox, since you asked. And you can still love all the same people, but not just those people. You start to love even more. See? And then you start to love love, not just people. See? It's not about loving things, because there's a difference. You start to enter the domain of love, and you just love. So everyone can be loved, and everything can be loved. Now, there's another question that comes into this kind of consideration for a lot of people. Say, well, does that mean I'm not going to know what to do with myself because I'm in love with everybody? You know, is there any differentiation? And the fact here is that, well, the heart is smarter than anything you've ever imagined yourself to be. So it knows better than you how and what to love. It doesn't love to hurt itself or hurt others. So already that's out of your grasp, see, as a human. Because it's love for love's sake. And it's a mystery. Let's say it's an ideal, but it's really something which burns everything in the process that you suffer. Because as long as you're suffering that, then the big question comes in, where's God in your darkness? Where is love in your self-presumed darkness, or that which you feel you are, which you are not, never have been? So what's up? Why are you being that which is not true to you as a spirit? But very mysterious questions.
Can one ever have presumed karmic obligations that should be or must be addressed before they are initiated into this process of purification?
Well, if we're speaking about radical spiritual practice, it's part of a, perhaps we can use these terms here, it's part of a gradual awakening. That everything you've been is not real. Everyone you've known is not the reality. Everyone you've known is not the reality. Everyone that is the reality. Everything that is the reality, and everyone and everything source is more the reality, since it is the more dominant reality that nobody sees. We're talking about the spiritual reality. Because all the obligations we have, we inherit, and they're passed on, see? And they are taken on, see, as real. And they are karmically, conventionally real up to a point. But when, let's say, the gods call you, you come running. And that's the norm. That's the natural law of it, see, when it comes. Now, we can compare it to the mothership showing up, you know, in, say, Central Park, right? New York City, Central Park. And some people will be horrified by it, and other people will say, no, I'm going. And they'll feel it, and they'll go. They may be going to their deaths, they may be going to a whole new universe, right? And heaven, they may be actually entering heaven. They might also be lunch for the creatures who are piloting the ship. Yeah? So we need to have, in other words, we need to have more openness to what the divine is. So we need instruction on the divine, not just religion and talking about heaven as some kind of distant, remote elsewhereness, something you don't really know. No, we need to know what the heart is now, presently. We need to know what its function is as love. See, true heart love, see? Connecting us with everything equally. And so the universe of equalityness opens up. Everything is everything, and thus is nothing. Once we start to open to these infinitenesses, this could be called good practice. And we're not then following the Jesus or the masters of the Orient or the North, the West or the South. We're becoming them. We're not beneath them. We are walking with them. We're not above them. We are walking with them. See? We are then hand in hand with the mastership. See? Who wants to do that? Who's ready for that? And this is what practice prepares you for. Entering a degree of mastery that enables you, as a result, to be able to pass that on to other people. Not so much by word. No, passing it on by demonstration. How you live. How you live beyond your confusion. How you live in the light. And this, I feel this segment should emphasize more the light than the karmatic conditions which are begging for the light.
From chapter 68, you write, those ignorant of the way who go about their mundane business accordingly may not sin in the same way. However, those who know but who do not do everything in their power to attain wisdom or its liberation, even at the cost of great sacrifice, are indeed those who sin while knowing better. Are those who have sinned while knowing better considered forsaken in the eyes of the Master? And if so, will they ever get a second chance at redemption?
Those who sin, who know better. Now that's kind of a paradox. If you know better, why would you sin? Would you sin against yourself? You never sin against any so-called God. Or, God is transcendent nature, so it's absurd to say you sin against God. There's no God to sin against. Okay? You sin against yourself. That means you short circuit your own unfoldment by doing certain things. You cause delays in your own progression, say, by doing certain. That could be eating too much, spending too much time on the computer, or playing video games, being distracted. When you know you have the kingdom to realize, you have enlightenment to realize, you have heart realization to realize in this lifetime. See? You have a lot of things to do. You have family to take care of, you have jobs to keep. All of these things are doable, and yet you want to balance all of that out with this sense of spiritual, say, consciousness. Right? Original consciousness, source consciousness. It's not like a trip that's outside of the material mind, like the material people say, it's spiritual. They're on this spiritual trip, okay? Right? As if it's a trip. What is the heart? Is it just a material thing? What is love? Is that a material trip? Is love really a material trip? Right? Is the connection between a mother and child a material trip? See, or is that a psychic trip? See, that's a psychic fact. So we're talking about psychic facts as part of this whole process. And what we need to do in terms of what sinning is, that means missing the mark and not doing what Spirit would have us do, which is to find happiness here, which is to find, let's say, peace here, and some of the things I mentioned earlier in terms of love, wisdom, clarity, and bliss. Pushing everything aside because our presumed obligations, survival obligations, are so important that we have to negate happiness. That's a paradox. That's a dilemma. That's a huge dilemma. That's a problem of mankind. How do you do that? How do you let go to do this? What are you willing to sacrifice to be happy? That's the real question here. And not sin, if you know better, right? If you in fact know better to do better in order to be better.
From chapter 69, you write, each incarnated spirit soul must somehow disconnect themselves or be disconnected by some compassionate or obligated angel or guide from the maddening and downward spiraling vortex of the negative stream of consciousness, which embraces and imprisons most beings for certain relative periods of time. My question is, what is the best way for someone to disconnect themselves from the negative stream of consciousness? Can thinking positive and or having a positive attitude help someone to disconnect?
The thought about, let's say, the positive, the thought about spirit is helpful, right? Because it poses a question, maybe even proposes that there may be a paradox here, something missing in one's life, something profound missing. Because we are time machines for the most part, space beings in time machine bodies, let's say, to a certain degree. But not necessarily, see, that positive thought is going to help. We need to open to what spirit is. We need to be directed to what spirit is, see, apart from religious idealism and fanaticism. See, it's more native than it is theoretical and psychological, see, or hypothetical. See, it's more native. That means more now, more here, and more in our beingness. See, not in our mental state, but in our actual beingness. Being what? Being light. See? It doesn't matter what your mental condition is, or what your mental state is, or what your karmic responsibilities are. You couldn't be unless you were being light. You are being light, but you're not consciously being light. You are consciously, maybe unconsciously, but consciously, unconsciously being anything but light. You're being time. Time ruled. Time programmed. See? Programmed to be human in a certain sort of set of agendas and behaviors. And that becomes your norm. That's not true to your spiritual nature. So then it becomes an issue. How does one find what their real spiritual nature is? See? We need to know how to get to that realization as soon as we can. See? And who that realization is. Not just what the realization is, but who is that realization of spiritual nature. See? Is it back 2,000, 5,000 years ago? Is it forward 5,000, 10,000 years ago? Or is it present? And if it's present, how do we access it? Do we pray for it? Well, we're already being it, but unconsciously. So how do you leap into conscious realizing or realization of the origin of our light nature, our light being, our enlightened being?
Do most individuals unconsciously contribute to the negative stream of consciousness while not actually being imprisoned by it? In other words, could someone unconsciously be feeding it while someone else near or close to them is suffering it? If so, is there anything one can do to lessen or cease altogether their contribution to this negative stream?
All beings are by blood imprisoned in the stream of karmic processes, cause and effect processes. You are what you are because you've been what you are because your family was what it was, and blah 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 blah, all back into the infinite. Programming, habit, forms, thought forms as habits, emotional forms as habits. And so the materialization process, incarnation process, is one that rarely brings you to the spiritual in the beginning. It's rare. Right? You have to struggle your way towards the spiritual. See? And in the process, you want to be picking up clues to what the light is. You want to be taking notes as to what the light is. See? And sometimes you have to experience extreme pain and suffering and sorrow and loss and grief, tragedy, before you awaken to another level of consciousness outside of the mechanical material consciousness, which is really a mechanical consciousness that offers you very few options. See? And by mechanical I mean something which is based upon, a timeline back and a timeline forward. See? But we are not time. See, the problem with that is, although while that works for the physical body and the time machine run by the heart pulse, we are spirit first. We are timeless in nature, yet we are stuck in time machine bodies believing that is our destiny, and that is only partially true. So we need to really quickly, urgently access knowledge of the true spiritual beyond the religious ideas. And not all of them are off the mark. No, they're pointing in the right direction. But they're keeping you, well, sort of like, what is the word, drowning in so much dogma you have to believe for the wrong reasons. that you're not going to find your spiritual until you pass over, or until it somehow or other imposes itself on you, and you start to change your direction towards the spiritual, and not religion past, present or future, or an idea. It is more than an idea, it's a realization. There is no idea that is spiritual in nature, true. The idea is it's just an idea. It's like that. That's not what it is. It's not a thought, it's beyond thought. It's a realization. It's not a thought process.